Thank you for joining our webinar, Build versus Buy, the Software Company Dilemma, hosted by Logi Analytics and ProcessMaker. The format of this webinar will be 3 questions answered by today's 2 special guests, Brian Brinkman, VP of Products at Logi Analytics, and Taylor Dondich, Chief Technical Officer at ProcessMaker. Let's get started with the first question. Who really makes the decision whether or not to partner with an OEM supplier or build it oneself? Is it the Chief Technology Officer or the Chief Product Officer?
That's a really good question. And I think I'm going to tackle this by answering the question from a couple different angles. Ideally, the CTO and the CPO would jointly arrive at a decision based on the software, the product, or the application's needs and a set of criteria. And for every application, that can be different. So it is important to understand what those things are before making a decision. If the product is a very technical product, or it's for use maybe with other products, and there are certain architectural concerns that must be adhered to, and those requirements dictate that everything gets built, then you have, I think, a set of pretty good reasons and criteria for wanting to build. If at the same time the product doesn't have specialized needs, what's more important is the overall capabilities and meeting those capabilities now and in the future on a timeline that matters, and making sure that dev cycles are quicker, then I think you're going to see the Chief Product Officer have more influence. So again, ideally it's both, but it really somewhat depends on the product itself. Now, there's a couple other answers to this question that aren't related to products and architecture and requirements. One is just who has more political capital, or said differently, who is kind of the most forceful individual in the room. So often that's the person who gets to make the ultimate decision. So if I'm a chief technical officer and I'm a founder of the company, I might have overruling authority over the chief product officer. And there's no amount of logic or data that's ever going to change that process. In decision-making process, if I decide as a chief technical officer and I'm a founder and I have a lot of power and clout that we're going to build everything, then you're pretty much going to build everything, irrespective of what the data and analysis says. And that would go equally as well for the chief product officer in a similar situation. So those are real concerns. The last question, or the last angle on this, on who really makes the decision, sometimes neither one of them do. And what I mean by that is many times the product leaders and development leaders that report to the CTO and the chief product officer have the influence, so much so that they can make the decision somewhat de facto, irrespective of what the executive management team wants. And what I mean by that is many times we see chief product officers, chief technical officers who want something, but the product teams, the development teams below them are so forceful that irrespective of a decision coming from the executive side, they overrule it, whether implicitly by saying, no, I'm not going to do it, or implicitly by just not adhering to the directive from above. And while that seems a little far-fetched, we see that happen all the time, where the on-the-ground dev and product teams just ignore the mandates of their leaders for whatever reason. Maybe they think the decision was wrong. Maybe they think the criteria was inaccurate, or maybe they just have a favorite way to do something and they want to keep doing that irrespective of what the data might say.
You have to look at it as two sides of the discussion. Okay, the CPO, the Chief Product Officer, needs to define the offering that the company wants to give their customers. So what's the ask? what service offering and the details within the company are you trying to strike and provide? When it comes to product, the how isn't the question. It's the what. What are you trying to build? So the CPO doesn't care what technologies or products or partnerships are used to deliver the features. The CPO just cares about the features. On the other hand, the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer, he or she cares about the technology used. What's the level of effort for building it internally with his or her own resources versus utilizing a potential external partner and then piggybacking on top of their offering while still utilizing it to fulfill the feature requirements that the CPO defined previously. And then also, does the partner's technology roadmap align with the demands that the CPO has built out for the foreseeable future, with the product roadmap? So is the CTO's internal resources too busy with other projects to build internally? These are the questions that, in the end, the CTO really does care about the how, and utilizing OEM partnerships and their technologies is just one part of the puzzle he or she needs to solve.
Thank you both. Second question, can OEM software functionality be delivered over the public cloud, or will companies, ISVs, insist on bringing the software in-house?
The short answer is absolutely. The OEM software functionality should be delivered over the public cloud. We see in the marketplace that is by far and away the preferred mechanism to access and deploy that information. There are certainly some product and software teams that would still like to manage it in-house, will still deploy on-premises to their customers. And in some case, that's mandated and dictated. There are certainly some governmental institutions, some financial institutions, some healthcare companies that want and would actually mandate that all software applications live within their entire control. But by and large, absolutely everyone's looking for the analytical functionality to be delivered over the cloud. And I will take it a step further. We are seeing in the marketplace the desire for deployment flexibility and speed of deployment, which is almost certainly tied to DevOps processes, to be a key criteria for any deployment. And the thing that's driving that, obviously, is companies want to be able to issue more functionality quicker so they can get it into the marketplace and test it with their customers. The simplest way to do that by far is with a cloud deployment, because the company can manage the software, they can manage the updates, they can also roll back if they find that the customer's responses to a new capability are poor or they're confusing or it degrades the overall experience of the software. So the second reason that the second requirement, I think, for over the cloud capabilities is the ability to be able to deliver that over any public cloud. And this is increasingly becoming a requirement. So one of the things we see ISVs very much concerned about is lock-in with any particular public cloud vendor. So you'll see new or newer deployment capabilities typically around containers and being able to port those containers between public clouds, as well as being able to elastically scale those containers to match the demand that their customers are creating. And so that is very much a top of mind we see in the market, because otherwise many of these software companies do not feel like they have the power to negotiate with the massive public cloud providers that exist. So additionally, the ability to deploy over the cloud also gives them the ability to address issues like high availability. So they can run in multiple clouds, making sure that their application is available to their customers literally at all time and in all corners of the world. So We see very few people wanting to deploy on-premise, although there are definitely some use cases, as we said. And most of what we see in the market is people moving from their on-premises deployments to the cloud for that increased delivery speed, for the responsiveness to the customers, as well as for performance and availability.
So one of the advantages of using partnerships is to offload as much as possible the responsibility of the service delivery to your customers. So the more responsibility the partner can take on, the better. Now, of course, there are certain regional business legal requirements that you might need to enforce, which will kind of sway to one direction or the other. But the business world is kind of catching up with cloud providers while fulfilling the legal compliance, requirements that are needed. So what this means is that more and more businesses today have confidence that cloud-based service providers can fulfill the service delivery of their offerings much better than building the team and infrastructure in-house, and then also not having to jump through the potential legal hoops to do so.
Thank you both. Third and final question. What would you consider to be the most important factor for an organization when choosing whether to buy a solution or build a solution in-house?
The most important factor that we hear almost universally when we talk with product teams is the capability we are going to put in the product core to the product and core to our capabilities and skill sets or not? And if the answer is it's not, then in every case, you should buy. So what we see is people build applications. They could be a fraud application. They could be a risk management application, a healthcare application. And they're very good at those applications, and they all need analytics. And in order for them to keep pace with the demands that their customers are placing on them, and to future-proof their applications, they're much better off buying a solution and incorporating that, embedding that into their product. The alternative is they have to develop analytics expertise themselves, and that is a pretty significant task. If you look in the marketplace, there are probably hundreds of analytics offerings out there, anywhere between open source components and commercial vendors, and there's a lot of experience. And to replicate that with one or two or three developers inside your organization, you're just never going to get to the same level of sophistication. Not to mention that when you dedicate your development staff to that task, then they are now directed away from their core application. So one of the things that we hear a lot is, in order for me to meet my product roadmap, I need to be completely focused on it. And if I have to take some of my development and product team and have them work on something that's not core to the application, our overall roadmap is going to suffer. And the result is those companies that buy solutions that aren't core, they find that their roadmap by far and away improves. Not only are they achieving more of the roadmap, if you will, the items on the schedule and maybe some extra ones that are stretch goals, but they're achieving it on a timeline of patterns, meaning they're hitting their target dates with the capabilities they want. And so that is the fundamental question on build versus buy, really, which is it core to your application? Because if it's not, it's going to be a distraction, and you're going to find that the capabilities you put into the marketplace are going to not be consistent with what the market's demanding and your customers are demanding. And so everything's going to suffer. Your analytics is going to suffer, and your core applications are going to suffer.
So time of delivery. Okay, so with every new feature or product, the time to get it into the customer's hands early so that you can iterate, that's going to be key. If the OEM supplier has a bunch of red tape and hurdles to jump through in order to get something functional, then the time slips away on determining if the partnership is even going to be successful in the first place. If you can partner with someone and deliver something functional in 3 months or less, I consider that a success.
Thank you for joining today's webinar, as well as our guests Brian Brinkman, Taylor Dondich, Logi Analytics, and ProcessMaker, and all of you for attending. I'd like to open things up now for questions from any attendees.